Aloha and welcome to our Waiʻanae Coast Candidate Forum 2018. Glad to have you folks back again, and we just thank you for making it to our host here at the Ōlelo Studios in Mapunapuna, Oahu. Tonight, as you know, we have this forum so that we can hear your hearts, so that our people of Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, can hear where you're coming from. So please relax and just, transparency is what we're about, giving you grassroots opportunities. And we just want to be able to go ahead and start this program very shortly. On to my right, I have our timekeeper, who is also spearheading this Waiʻanae Candidate Forum for the last 4 years since 2012, Kapua Keliʻikoa Kamai. I am Lokana Keliʻikoa. And go ahead, my brother.
Kauko'ohua Kalani Wahilani. Mahalo, mahalo nui.
So as we had mentioned earlier, we're going to give you an opening of 2 minutes, and at the end we'll have a 1-minute closure. So Joe, let's start with you.
Sure. Aloha, my name is Joe Jordan. I'm a resident of the Waiʻanae Coast for over 45 years. Former business owner for about 35 years. Former neighborhood board member of over 12 years. Former legislator of 6 years. That's a lot. But anyway, thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you guys for hosting this again. I think this is your 4th annual. Other than that, I look forward to engaging the conversation this evening, and I hope we have a vibrant discussion.
Thank you. Cedric.
Aloha kako. My name is Cedric Asuenga Gates, and I'm a lifetime resident of the Waiʻanae Coast. I started my journey into politics when I started a nonprofit organization called Active Hawaii in 2011. And that organization was created to support our community's health and well-being through an active lifestyle. After that, I joined the Waiʻanae Neighborhood Board and served on the board for 3 years, and also had the privilege of serving as the chairman before being elected to office. I also worked for Councilwoman Kimberly Pine, Representative Karen Owana, as well as Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. And through my work in office, I feel that we've been able to accomplish so much in such a short amount of time, but there's so much more to do, and which is why I'm running for re-election. I hope that I can get your vote in this August 11th primary election, and I hope to represent your community, our community, and your ohana in this upcoming sessions. Aloha.
Thank you, Cedric. I'm going to start with you on the first question tonight. Given the huge number of homelessness, houseless people living in Waiʻanae, would you continue to support a community dialogue about what to do to address these issues? Which would include the homeless people as well? And if so, what can be done? Especially, we're talking about, I'm sure you're very familiar, Waiʻanae. Can you go ahead and expound on that for us?
Yeah, so since taking office, I feel that my office has been taking direct action in regards to our homeless situation. The first bill that I was able to pass as a freshman legislator was a study on ohana zones. And ohana zones meaning micro units with wraparound services to support our homeless community. With that bill, it introduced the recommendations to the legislature on what to do and what would be needed to actually successfully run an ohana zone. This year, 2018, we actually passed a piece of legislation as a pilot project to fund ohana zones. And we allocated $30 million to the governor's office to really deal with the diverse impacts that homelessness is having across our coast as well as our state. Right now, the governor has the authority to release those funds and to administer a project in our community and throughout the state to really address the homeless situation. As far as the dialogue with the community, I think as the chairman of the neighborhood board, when I heard that the boat harbor was possibly going to get swept, I called Scott Morishige's office, who is the homeless coordinator for the governor's office, to come down to the community to have those deep discussions about what is the plan of action. Through those discussions leading up to now, 2018, the governor has engaged with Twinkle Borges as well as the Puhonua Waiʻanae Ohana there to talk about transitioning them to another parcel of land with the services necessary to actually support their cause. moving forward, I think that we need to continue to administer mental health services, substance abuse treatment, and other programs like employment training and financial literacy to really get our families back on track and onto that life that we all want for everyone in our community, because they're all our ohana.
Thank you, Cedric. Joe?
Yes, homelessness, houselessness, these are all titles that we give to individuals that don't have a structure. Yes, I started working on homeless issues probably way back in 2000 when I sat on the Waiʻanae Coast Neighborhood Board. I was the Park and Rec chair for my entire time, 12 years. And during that time, we watched our parks get inundated with individuals residing there and our community members not feeling able to access their public beach parks. So we started having dialogue way back then with HPD, with the city and county parks, with the mayor's office at that time, with service providers already doing outreach within our community, such as the Waiʻanae Coast Coalition. That dialogue began and then stepped into the governor's office at that time, which was Governor Lingo. And she came out to our community way back in 2003. And we had a meeting at the Waiʻanae District Park with well over 300 individuals that was broadcasted on Ōlelo Live. So this is not a new issue to our community. It has grown, quite obviously, in the last 15 years. But under Governor Lingo's administration, she provided the emergency proclamation in 2006, which gave our community the opportunity to show the rest of the state how it could possibly be done with emergency, transitional, and permanent housing, as well as developing better outreach programs. During that time, we created a system. That system has been changed. In 2011, upon entering the legislature, I was selected to be the representative on the Interagency Council for Homelessness in the state of Hawaii and served on it for 6 years. We need more dialogue in our community, and we really haven't had dialogue at all, not only in the Waiʻanae Coast, but on the island and our neighbor islands. And we have this lack of communication between our two government agencies, which is the city and county and the state. And we need to start that dialogue, even if it's going to start in our community, because it's obvious our government agency is not doing that. And we need to start helping address these issues.
Thank you.
So my first question for the both of you would be, what is your plan to boost the economy on the Waiʻanae Coast? Starting with you, Joe.
My plan, when I was in office, I wanted to create almost 1,500 jobs in our community. And that's not with a Walmart or a Target moving to our community. That's creating small entrepreneurship in our community. That's helping develop small businesses that may employ anywhere from 100 and less employees. I come from a small business background that had less than 10 employees. I know what it is like to run a business in Hawaii, but we need to provide people the opportunity to do that instead of doing their regular 9 to 5 at some job off our coastline. We need to empower our people. We have great talent on our coastline that creates awesome products. We also need to encourage other businesses to come to our community. And I'm not talking about fast food businesses. That's not what we need. We need businesses that can serve our community. I'm not talking about bringing another CVS into our community. Within a year and a half from now, we'll have 3 in less than 10 miles. And they're not there to serve us with their dog food and diapers. They're there to sell us their prescription drugs. So we really need to encourage other businesses to come to Hawaii, to come to our coastline, and provide that opportunity for our constituents to live and buy their products on the coastline, not having to go down to Kapolei. If you live in Makaha, you're already going to spend half an hour to get off the coastline, then 15 more minutes to get to Kapolei. It's great for individuals in Nanakuli, but it's not great for people who live in Makaha. So how do we develop that? How do we bring small business to our community? Individuals like Lucky Cole that purchased the old Cornet store that once employed maybe 50 to 60 people, now is redeveloping that property for small businesses. And that's what we need to start encouraging. How do we repurpose current properties that we have for entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Mahalo. And Cedric?
One of the big, I think, benefits of Waiʻanae is that we have a lot of ag land. And I think that we need to really invest in our local farmers. As the ag committee member, that was something that I really wanted to push forward. As far as small businesses, we have to really cut taxes on small businesses to really make it feasible for them to run businesses, hire our local residents, and make sure that they're meeting their bottom line. Also, I think that investing in our youth is one of the best investments we can make. As a state representative, I introduced the career pathway bill that Governor Ige signed into law recently, and that bill allows the school system to basically create entrepreneurships within the school, like Sea Rider Productions, allowing them to sell their products and services to the broader community and invest that money back into the school for that specific program. Also with the Marine Learning Science Center, where they sell ogle, where they sell kalo, where they sell fish, you know, to have them be able to really develop a curriculum that allows the students to have real life experiences, and when they come out, they can get they can create a small business within our community. And we have a lot of young entrepreneurs coming up right now, as I know, within the community. Another big push that I think we really need to do is ecotourism. We have already a lot of tourists coming to our community, supporting nonprofits like Ka'ala Farms, where you can get your hands dirty and really experience the cultural aspect of Waiʻanae. I think that is a big economic booster for our economy, and that's something that we also have to look at. Another issue, I think, is looking at getting back military land. On Lu'alu'ale Naval Road, there's a lot of land that is being unused. Can we get some of that land back to create maybe a light industrial complex of some sort where people can create these small businesses?
Mahalo, Cedric. Mahalo, Joe. Great answers from both of you folks. Mahalo.
Thank you. Still staying online with the federal government. What is your view of the role of the U.S. military in our islands, and would you like that? Would you like to see that increase, decrease their occupation here?
For me, on my position with military, of course, I support our troops. We have a lot of community members who are in the service, and so much respect to them. As far as our landscape and all of the land that they are taking up, I feel that a lot of it needs to come back to the community. Again, as I stated before, some of that land needs to be used for housing, for creating agriculture, small businesses, and really allowing our community to flourish using the ceded lands that was ours to begin with. As far as deoccupation, I think that we are in a strategic location as far as the Pacific goes, and I really don't foresee the military pulling out completely from our islands, but I definitely would support a decrease of some sort as long as we are protected from other countries and so forth. I think that we really need to have the military pay their dues by investing into our community, investing into our transportation, investing in our educational system, lending a helping hand, which they do. And I think that needs to increase as far as their participation in our community in infrastructure and so forth. Kole Kole Pass was talked about. Although they haven't been as supportive as we need them to be, that's somewhere that I would like them to really look at improving, because our community is in desperate need of transportation relief. So with that, I would end on that.
Thank you, Cedric. Joe.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a child of a Marine veteran, 3 years in Vietnam, served 20 plus years. So I understand what it is to be a child of a military family. In fact, that's how I got to these islands as a child. About 2014, there was a proposal to reduce military forces here in the state. And I think they wanted to reduce it by about 36,000. I was supportive of, we need to look at that. I don't say remove it all at one movement, but how do we start reducing some of that footprint? Do we need all the training that we currently have here? Is it better spent on the west coast of the continent saving federal dollars versus bringing it all to Hawaiʻanae. I think these things need to be looked at a level on the federal, and we need to look at it as a state. We depend way too much on the military dollar for our economy, second to tourism. So if we are going to reduce forces here, how do we balance that in the economy? I think I was only one of 2 individuals that stood on the House floor and refused to sign a resolution to the federal government to stop the downsizing. So I made my statement very loud and clear back then. At what point in time do we have some of these lands back, meaning the state? At what point in time do we create a better balance with military and their cost savings versus locals not having the type of cost savings that the military do? How do we start looking at this and moving forward in our state? But yes, I believe their footprint should be reduced.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. My question for both of you folks, keeping to the military theme right now. Right now we have RIMPAC still going on, and there's a lot of movement consciously worldwide of, the desecration of Aina from, the military exercises. And so being a RIMPAC, what are your thoughts about, because I watched some videos on the RIMPAC and the exercises, and, they live fire, and, they do training on land as well as the ocean. And when they blow up, these things in the ocean, the natives in oceans are being affected too. So as a legislator, would you implement things to, because there's a whole movement now and try to stop the impact coming to Hawaii because of the desiccation of the Aina and our resources. So I want to start with you, Cedric.
So I don't support live firing at our bases. I think, like you said, it's a matter of desecration. And we really have to be mindful of the sacredness of our Aina and be mindful of our ancestors who came before us, who worshipped on there and who used those lands for cultural practices. So starting with that, I don't support the live firing. As far as RIMPAC goes, again, it is very difficult in your state position to really have a strong impact on the federal government and their movement. Given that this is a exercise participated throughout United States with other countries, it makes it very difficult. As far as representing our community specifically, if that is something that our community doesn't support, that is something that I will be very vocal about as the representative of our district. And in regards to just the desecration totally, I, again, will go back to renegotiating contracts with the military as far as land use and seeing how do we get those lands back and also stop that live firing happening right now.
Thank you, Cedric. Joe?
Well, first and foremost, they shouldn't be using live firing at all. Our community has that effect from the use of makua since the early 30s, 1930s. During my tenure on the neighborhood board, there was a 300-pound bomb uncovered in Makua Valley. So there's things that are in that valley that were thrown into the valley for training purposes that are still alive today. Of course, we have a court case that doesn't allow them, it allows them to live fire once a year. The federal government and the Army have chosen not to live fire in almost 12 years now. But I believe they shouldn't be using live firing. I mean, you've heard incidents on Pohakaloa where there's been a couple soldiers that have lost their lives. I think at least 2 or 3 incidents with live fire, unfortunately. I believe maybe RIMPAC could be held in a different area. We shouldn't have to benefit from this all the time. There's other stages in the Pacific that they could probably do that same type of exercise. I think, again, we have to really look at why are we training so much in this space in Hawaii when the change in the Pacific realm has changed. You know, there's different ways of training. And when you start talking about federal, and that's not what we're running for, not a federal office, but that's what we need to talk about. Those are federal dollars coming here because they've chosen to have those trainings here when they could have them somewhere else. And how do we start looking at that, especially when the effect is their remnants are left here, their bombs are left here, and then there's cleanup later on that again costs us money. And we've seen those over the last few years on remediation of cleaning. How do we continue to have that voice in the government to ask them maybe train in other space?
Mahalo. Mahalo, you too. Thank you.
Our Waiʻanae Coast Emergency Access Road. It's been a sore thumb. I mean, I know there's been some alternatives, some suggestions as to how we can go about doing this. What's your take on that, Joe? How do you think that can work for us?
I sat on the neighborhood board when it first started, way back with the city and county of Honolulu, coming with their draft plan from Nanakuli to Makaha and using our back roads to get from point A to point B. Some of those portions haven't been completed since that started almost 10, 12 years ago. Interesting enough, there's been dialogue more recently about some of the stuff we spoke about way back then. So when the city and county built Pa'akea extension between Hakimo and Lulu'ule Navmag, it was supposed to be open 24 hours a day. There was an agreement with the private landowners to allow it to be built, to allow it to have fences, to protect the private properties, and leave it open 24/7 so community can access the back roads to get to Sac and Save or Nanakuli without having to go onto Farrington Highway. Unfortunately, our community's voices deafened with the mayor at the time, who made the final decision to close it and use emergency purposes to open up that particular area. Interesting, the conversation has now come back into play about possibly leaving it open. Some of the challenges would be with Lulu'ule Navmag, seeing that is still currently owned by the Navy, and there's conditions on that road. I think we should have the opportunity to travel from Makaha to Nanakuli without having to come on to Farrington Highway. But then we have to make sure those infrastructures on those back roads are usable. I was just on those back roads and there was somebody speeding and it's very dangerous. I had a friend that lost their life on that back road and crippled their partner in the vehicle. So these are things that if we're going to use these back roads with higher congestion of vehicular traffic, we need to make sure that they're safe roads to use.
Thank you, Joe. Cedric.
When I first got elected, the first issue that I wanted to tackle was traffic. Because it decreases the quality of life for all of our residents on the Waiʻanae Coast. So as the state representative, I introduced a bill to create a secondary access road into our community. That bill went all the way to the Senate, Ways and Means, where it died because we were able to secure $3 million in the budget for that planning process. As far as the emergency access road, every day is an emergency for our Waiʻanae residents. When it takes you over 2 hours to get home every day, that's an emergency. When it takes you 2 hours to get to work every day, that's an emergency, which is why I pushed to fund the opening of the emergency access road, which we were able to secure in this year's budget. We are able to secure $2 million to condemn Pa'akea Road and upgrade Pa'akea Road to city standards. DOT has taken on that task to open up that road for daily use by improving it to city standards and then giving it to the city to manage. I think, again, that's a concern echoed by our community, and as the representative, that's my job to represent the voice of our community, which I think I did by securing that funding and having that dialogue. Of course, Senator Shimabukuro was a big help in securing those dollars in the budget, so I would be remiss if I didn't recognize her. But I think that we need to build onto that, and that was why we were able to secure another $2 million, which brought us to a total of $5 million for the parallel access road, which the plan is to open up the Navmag to Pa'akea access part and then connect a road from the Naval Road to Nanakuli Avenue, which would run behind the homestead, and then look for another extension to maybe take us to Makakilo or Kunia. And that's something that I believe that our community is in desperate need of as far as traffic relief, and that is something that I will continue to make a priority if reelected.
Mahalo. My next question for the two of you folks would be, what are some of your ideas to leverage federal resources to strengthen education? For example, early childhood support and programming. Cedric.
In regards to drawing down federal dollars, that is something that DOE as the department really has control over. What we as legislators have control over is our state budget, and how do we bring dollars to our community through our state budget. As far as our community in particular, we have been able to secure millions for improvements in regarding our athletic field, our track, our AC units that we need desperately on the Waiʻanae coast. We have been able to secure funding for Sea Rider Productions, a Marine Learning Science Center, and a lot of improvements through actual legislation, which the Career Pathway Bill that I discussed earlier is super important for our community, because that again allows us to retain money and create our own revenue within our school system, which I think is super important if you're talking about sustainability. Because with changing of administration, as we have a new president, funding may change to our communities and our state. So making sure that we are being forward thinkers and really preparing our communities to withstand those changes is something very important for our community to put at the forefront of discussion. As far as drawing down federal dollars, again, we can encourage DOE to look for grants, look for different opportunities to draw down these funds, and I think that with the support of the legislature and our congressional delegation, we'll be able to do that as long as we create a plan of where this funding will go to and how it will be spent and how we will have oversight on these dollars.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, while I served in the legislature, I focused on education because I was doing that prior to entering the legislature. And looking at the DOE budget, I found that the Department of Education didn't pull down almost $30 million in food money for our students' lunches. And they had been negligent in almost 4 years in doing this. So we kind of rode on their back until they made sure that they pulled down those dollars, because those dollars help reduce the cost of a student's lunch. And if they didn't bring those dollars down, then you as Hawaii taxpayers would have had to foot that additional $30 million. We also focused on pulling down the impact money that the military children attending our public schools. The federal government provides additional dollars to the state of Hawaii to help subsidize those students in impact within our public school education. And we bring down anywhere between $30 and $50 million a year. We have to be more cognizant of how those monies are spread out and not necessarily spent in central Oahu, where most of the footprint is for the military. And hold the DOE accountable, because they make the decision where those dollars go. We also have to remind that the DOE also pulls down our Native Hawaiian Education Fund that helps with the university, as well as early learning for Native Hawaiian children and preschool, as well as helping fund charter schools. We have to hold the Department of Education accountable for spending these monies appropriately for what they were allocated to. And if people don't understand that, then the DOE chooses where they would like to put those monies, not necessarily to what they were targeted for. And in my opinion, I don't think they're still being distributed accordingly. And we don't have anybody earmarking and watching it anymore. So we need to have more accountability with the Department of Education and making sure those federal dollars that we're entitled to for our school programs come down and are spent appropriately.
Joe, what was the driver in your life that made you want to go higher to legislature? You know, you've always been community, you've been board member. What actually motivated you to want to go into legislature? Is there anything in particular that stood out that made you want to take that step forward?
I think it was when you're younger, you're kind of footloose, fancy-free, and you just kind of do what you would like to do. As I got towards the ending of my 20s, I was expressing my voice one day, and my mother looked at me and said, "Shut your mouth. You don't vote, you don't have anything to say." And it caught me off guard, and I said, "You're right." So I started participating. And then I started realizing that I'm in one piece. Why am I in one piece? You know, how come I'm not like some of my classmates who were no longer with us, or who had fallen to drug addiction, or who were on, unfortunately, the top 10 wanted lists to be arrested? Why was I so different than them when you walk the same path? And then I started realizing that this community that I was in had showered all this greatness. I just needed to open my eyes. And I started opening my eyes, and I started saying, hey, I need to start give back. And I started giving back by cleaning up rubbish on the side of the road, cleaning up beach parks, just doing whatever needed to be done, cut bushes. And then somebody challenged me, "Why don't you join a neighborhood board?" And I said, "No way, I can't speak publicly, I can't, no way." I was very shy. And I challenged myself, and I ran for the neighborhood board. And I just started diving headfirst into issues, and I haven't stopped. Interesting, somebody told me one day, "Can you turn it off?" And I said, "Turn off what?" He goes, "Stop talking about the rubbish didn't pick up, or somebody didn't clean the toilet, or somebody didn't fix the beach park swing," you know? And I'm like, well, that's what we all should be doing, right? Regardless if you're an elected official, regardless if you're a community member, everybody should be that way. We all need to give back for a better space to live in.
Thank you. Cedric.
What inspired me was being a product of the Waiʻanae community. Growing up, going to Kamaile Elementary School, Waiʻanae Intermediate School, Waiʻanae High School, you know, just being in the community and experiencing the same struggles that residents are still experiencing today really drove me to do more for myself and do more for our community. Again, as a young man in the community at the age of 17, I created a nonprofit called Active Hawaii. And with that, we wanted to inspire our youth to do more than just hang out with their friends and, you know, do drugs and do things that were popular back then. We wanted them to think about what they could do for our community. How can we improve our community for the future generations and for the people coming up behind us? As my parents were raising us in the community, I lost my mom at the age of 12, which really inspired me to look at the health conditions and how our community is at such a disadvantage when it comes to the infrastructure needed to live a healthy lifestyle, with our traffic being so bad and our members of our community stressing out so much on these issues that have a direct impact on myself. And then when I decided that I wanted to look at how can I get more involved in the community, it drew me to the neighborhood board. And I ran for the neighborhood board, was elected as the youngest member in the history of the neighborhood board commission. And when I looked around, I didn't see the youth voice, which also inspired me to look at being the voice for the youth. And so that has been one of my biggest missions, is to inspire the youth and get involved in that way. Then working for the elected officials, as I mentioned in my opening statement, that opened my eyes to the impact that government has on our communities and the positive impacts that they can have, which kind of drove me to getting involved into the political sector. Our kupuna, our community members urged me to run, and here I am today. So very proud of where we have made it from the beginning.
Thank you, Cedric.
Mahalo. So my next question for the both of you would be, how would you work to protect existing programs for Native Hawaiians? Starting with you, Joe.
Oh, I haven't stopped on working for programs that are the benefit to the Native Hawaiian populace. I think it's all our obligation, especially elected officials, to be making sure that monies come down from federal level that should be appropriated to Native Hawaiians. And if it's monies that go to a specific agency like Department of Hawaiian Homelands or the Department of Education for Native Hawaiian education, or to the university system for helping subsidize students at higher education levels, or if it's monies that come and go straight to OHA. We should be holding all these different agencies and departments accountable for those dollars that come down and make sure that they're spent properly. And if need be, have reports. And I know people hate reports, but if you don't have accountabilities of where those dollars go, then questions start getting arised. And once the monies are gone, you're not going to be able to find them again. So while I served in the legislation for 6 years, that was like the meat of what I did. I tracked down public trust land revenues. I made sure that they went to the right departments. I made sure that they were, we had better procured contracts at fair market value. I made sure that dollars came in to programs for language, for education, and I kept tracking it. And probably didn't make some fans at some times because I held them accountable. And that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that those small dollars that come in, and we need more, that are spent properly and spent for the proper programs, especially for the Native Hawaiian population, and not misspent, you know. And that's hasn't stopped me from now on. I'm continuing to argue with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands on their revenues that come in. I still argue with the DOE on their revenues that come in and make sure they're spent properly.
A question to you, Cedric?
Well, the needs of our Kanaka Mo'oli are no different, are not really different from the needs of our community as a whole. Housing, education, transportation, jobs, these are all very important for our Kanaka Mo'oli. And I think that as a state representative, one of the biggest things as far as sitting on the legislature, I sat on the Committee on Ocean, Marine, Hawaiian Affairs. And sitting on that, I was able to really dive deep into many of the discussions around the Native Hawaiian community and really trying to get down to where we need to improve so that we can see the impact that we all want to see for our Kanaka Mo'oli. And again, it goes back to the housing, making sure that DHHL is developing housing for our beneficiaries and making sure that this is not a trickle-down effect where houses slowly go out to community. You know, in the Act, Prince Kohio Act, there was 194,000 acres put towards housing our Native Hawaiian community and having that positive impact for them. And we haven't seen that. There's still 27,000 Native Hawaiians on the waiting list right now, 30,000 who have passed already. That is unacceptable. And as a freshman legislator, I questioned DHHL. How do we improve the situation with the waiting list? Can we go knocking on doors to find out if beneficiaries who do not respond have moved or changed their contact information? How do we make sure that OHA is providing programs that are improving our educational system for our Native Hawaiians and supporting our housing as well? Because we have to end Native Hawaiian homelessness. And as a state representative and as a district representative for our community, that will be one of the biggest priorities that I will put on my agenda, to end Native Hawaiian homelessness.
Mahalo. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Cedric.
I think just a short one on this one. Knowing that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands came through our Prince Jonah Kuhio, it's a congressional act. And therefore, as a congressional act, we, the department, should have funding. We shouldn't have to be begging. Why are we begging for monies that all the other departments get big bucks, and we have such limited money? Why is that? Tell me, Cedric, what have you been able to do to help us in that Department of Hawaiian Homelands? That is what put our people on the land, is that budget that we need.
Yeah, and so with that, I have urged the finance chair and the finance committees to continue to increase the amounts allocated to DHHL, which we have. One of the big projects that we have been working on is the parallel access route that runs through DHHL property and is one of the very few locations that we have left as far as development of housing. With that secondary access route, I believe that DHHL will have the opportunity to develop homes for beneficiaries, which is desperately needed right now. So that is something that I have had a direct impact on. As far as continuing to increase the budget, that is something, as being on the finance committee, I can continue to advocate for and fight for. I have been constantly meeting with Joby and William Isla at DHHL to talk about solutions, talk about how do we create rent-to-own units so that people who don't have the financial capital can still get into a home? How do we make sure that we end Native Hawaiian homelessness? And how do we work towards a community that we can all be proud of, as far as Waiʻanae being the highest population of Kanaka Mo'ole? So I have been a staunch advocate for our community and the Native Hawaiian population through my position at the state ledge.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, I followed the Nelson case, which is the case that went up before the Supreme Court to provide proper funding for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And you're correct. This is a federal act under the 1920 Kuhio Act. And the federal government has neglected their obligation to fund that act outside of the NAHASDA money. And many people know that the NAHASDA money we didn't get probably in the last 2 years because it wasn't spent down enough. So the only thing we get from the federal government is the NAHASDA money, and that's not enough money. We need money for operations of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We need monies for rehabilitation programs that the Act states. We need monies for infrastructure, for homes, and infrastructure for our agriculture lands on DHHL. And the federal government has been negligent of that. And our congressional leaders, in my opinion, have been negligent of that as well. And that's why beneficiaries brought forward the Nelson case to tell the state that they needed to provide adequate funding to their department. Department of Hawaiian Homelands is a department within the state. And it took us from 2015, when the court said almost $23.7 million, and we still haven't gotten that full funding for operations, just operations. That's paychecks, putting the lights on, and picking up the phones. And we're still not receiving that for that department.
Thank you.
So mahalo. So we have like 3 minutes left. So we're gonna leave with a 1 minute closing for both of you folks. And mahalo nui for coming. So start off with you, Joe.
Sure. So 1 minute. Again, my name is Joe Jordan. I'm running for State House of Representatives for the House District 44. And I'm going to ask you to make sure that you pull a Democrat ballot in the primary election, because this race will be decided on August the 11th. And I'm asking for your support to bring me back to the House so I may represent our community. There is so much work to be done. And there's so much work to be done in the state, not only for homelessness, education, traffic, but we really need to look at the structure of our state and the accountability. I am not tied to any particular group. I am tied to your community. I am tied to you. I listen to your community voice. I don't listen to anybody else's voice. And I have proven that in my 6 years of serving in the legislature. And I humbly ask for your support. Mahalo.
Cedric.
Aloha kākou again. My name is Cedric Asuenga Gates, and I'm the candidate About Action. Since being elected, we have addressed many of the tough issues in our community regarding our transportation, getting funding for our parallel access route, our third lane, and opening our emergency access route for daily use. In regards to homelessness, I have introduced legislation to address our homeless situation through Ohana zones, providing micro units with wraparound services for our homeless population, with a $30 million allocation to actually fund projects within our community. In regards to education, making sure that we are investing in our youth, making sure that we are giving them the opportunities and the tools they need to succeed in the real world. And as the youngest elected official in the state of Hawaii, that is one of my biggest passions, in making sure that our keikis grow up to be productive members of our society, not behind bars, not on drugs, and are inspired to do more for our community. On August 11th, you have a choice. Vote for a future that you can believe in, and mahalo for everyone's support. Aloha.
We would just like again to thank everyone, especially you two, for joining us this evening. We would also like to remind everyone that we are a collaboration of many organizations on the Waiʻanae Coast, starting with our Makaha Hawaiian Civic Club, Waiʻanae Hawaiian Civic Club, Lua Le Hawaiian Civic Club, the Ōlelo Trust, B and Herbert Hugh Lynn from Waiʻanae Kai, Princess Kahanu Estates, Nanakuli Homestead, as well as Waiʻanae Valley Community Homestead Association, who has been the sponsor over the last 4 electoral since 2012. But more so for Ōlelo, always being in support of us, helping us to make this possible, that our candidates will be able to be heard statewide. Thank you very much. And of course for Kapua, who has continued to spearhead this, Holomua on her own, and all our volunteers. We've had wonderful volunteers, many first-time experience, and they just love it and are looking forward to the next one. I want to thank Kaukaohu for helping us. We've had Niniao, we've had Julie Kachola, Poka, and we had here today, we had Kaleo Okalani. All these commentators and moderators, our timekeepers, Meleana, and then we had our baby Radalyn.
Yes.
From the other day. But thank you everyone for joining us tonight and making it possible. Don't forget, get out there on August 11th. There's early voting, there's absentee ballot, there's no excuse not to vote.
If you haven't registered to vote, please register to vote.
Yeah, same day registration.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you, Cedric.
Well, here we are back again, this time to close the overall program for the community forum that we have presented.
Excellent opportunity to hear from these candidates that we would not normally hear from.
We'll only have a few minutes talking about this particular discussion or forum, and then we'll sort of generalize as to all the forums. If I may begin by saying that for the last 2 candidates, Joe Jordan, Cedric Gates, what comes to mind is the definition of a tragedy. What is a tragedy? It's not a choice between the good and the bad, but it's having to choose between 2 goods or 2 bads.
Yes.
And it was quite tragic over the last 2 panels that we had.
Okay.
Especially with regards to this panel.
Excellent.
You had 2 excellent
and that's
representatives.
The good, and that is the good news, for District 44, Waiʻanae, is like we have excellent candidates here. They have experience. They're quick. They understand the system. Incredible, like both the administrative and the legislative side and how that works. Including, they they understood the federal side too as well, and how that is to be leveraged to come into the community. I'm just really impressed and happy that proud of our choices here.
Yeah.
I wish we could have both of them.
That's a tragedy.
That is a tragedy. I see where you're going.
And so, we can go ahead and discuss the details of the programs, but essentially they were excellent remarks.
Excellent.
So I couldn't find real distinguishing aspects between the 2 candidates.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they both have really good understanding and specific programs and specific legislation and the history and they spend time in the coast and the neighborhood board, that whole situation. So we're just fortunate. So that's the good news. Waiʻanae is we have good candidates to choose from, and that unfortunately is a tragedy too.
Yeah. And yet we are reminded that this is the last few minutes that we have to close this overall program. And so what do you think of these forums? I think it's significant that a community is able to present these types of forums in such a public venue.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's excellent, and that's why I make time. Once I heard about it's an important initiative, and you know, they're doing it. They're community volunteers doing this, and that Ōlelo allows us to do this. It's important, and over the 2 nights I've learned a lot from the different candidates.
Yeah.
And you really get to hear, because it's enough time to get into an issue and really to hear how they express themselves, what concerns them, and their solution set. You know, excellent opportunity.
Yeah. To see both the good and the bad, and the ugly.
Right. I mean, excited to have different commentators to.
Yes.
But yes,
So
it's the reality of, you know, what's out there, and
Yeah.
now we can see it better, I think.
Yeah, so over the last 2 nights, we have had various panels. For tonight, we had the OHA trustees candidacy. It was very interesting to hear the various views. Many new faces as candidates, and some names that I was familiar with, but I had not really heard them speak on these issues.
Yes, yes.
And also people who had been involved in Hawaiian affairs or in government affairs, but now speaking more specifically on the Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Yes, yes.
So it's very curious, very interesting to see.
I think it's great to bring that experience to bear in an agency that I think needs that kind of perspective at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then last night we had the U.S. Senate, the U.S. congressional race, the governor's race.
Really interesting dialogue on that. Really interesting.
So we had a good time, and
Yes.
I want to thank all of you for joining us and being with us in this time that we have had.
Mahalo.
And I haven't been given the sign that we should wrap up. Not yet, I think.
I thought we
But
were-
hopefully we'll be back 2 years from now, and we'll take a look at who the candidates are again and present this to our community.
Yeah.
Okay, any last words?
Oh, and just go out and vote, you know.
If you can.
Yeah.
If they'll let you.
If they'll let you, Hawaii Nationals can.
So I'm giving the sign, that's it. Aloha Hawaii. Thank
Aloha.
you very much, Julie.
Mahalo, same
Yes.
to you.
Ahui ho.